Just a reminder that you can rate, like, comment, subscribe, and send a message about this podcast episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. Hello, Storm Writers. It's the Storm Writer. I'm doing a new podcast episode today, and the title of this episode is called Realizations in Red, because I'm going to be talking about topics that are a little bit difficult to talk about, topics for a mature audience. It won't be anything particularly obscene, but it deals with adult psychology and issues that are part of that. And my goal today is simple. When I talk about these things that I talk about, my goal is to have other people realize that someone you know, someone you care about, is dealing with these psychological issues. You know, I talk about addiction, porn addiction, things like that. And I'm doing that to build your empathy and to offer you a pathway to talk about this type of addiction with the people in your life, your loved ones, because you don't want them to get isolated, and you don't want them to become somehow ostracized. You don't want them to become the target of someone else's ire or someone else's resentment or pain, and so on. So there's a lot of complex issues to talk about in relation to this experience, in relation to this addiction. But the underlying message is that someone you know is a sex addict or a sex and love addict or a porn addict, and they're struggling. And you have to reach out to them. You have to find a way to communicate with them and be there for support. And you may need to further your understanding of what's out there and what issues people like this and people like me are struggling with. So that can be really helpful and really important. And so it's in that spirit that I talk about the things that I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my posts, Realizations in Red, part 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to speak about them. So I'm going to put them in podcast form so you can listen to them, but you won't be able to read them unless you're a paid subscriber, which means you won't be able to go back to it and search and zero in on particular issues and show them to someone else unless you're a subscriber to my Substack. And now that said, my Substack is called thestormwriter.substack.com, and on it you can read articles where I talk about my experiences, my travels, my art, my history, my creativity, but also I talk about my psychology. And I think that's where, well, sometimes I write about science fiction, psychology, art, education, the id, and my experiences as a school teacher, my experiences as an artist, and so on and so forth. And I can't emphasize how interesting it is when some of these themes intersect with other themes. So those are some of the things that I really like about my writing. I really like the fact that sometimes my life is like a movie, or sometimes there are things in my life that are really connected to the arts, whether they're pop culture, comics, movies, science fiction, and so on. So sometimes I write about themes where I'm not involved, but most of the time I'm connecting myself to them. And this one is one where I'm really shining a lens closely on my realizations, my personal realizations, in my searching and in my evaluating my past behavior. So it gets a little bit deep because of that. If you want to read more of my posts and know when my posts are being posted, when they're being shared, you can subscribe to my Substack. You can also like, share, and you can like and share about this podcast. and push all the buttons. You can comment. That's the other one. Liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Those are the things you can do. There are 4 things, and they're the same anywhere you go. You can like, you can share, you can comment, you can subscribe. Please feel free to do all of them. And also, please feel free to send me a message if there's something you really like or something you want to know more about. If you want to ask me about my experiences, anything I can share with you, I'm happy to share with you. And if you're interested in the specific question, how do you talk to your children about porn addiction if you are afraid that they have encountered pornography, online pornography, which is something that happens? That's something I'm going to explore more in the future. So please message me about that if it's something you want to discuss. It could inform my future posting, my future writing. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, let's begin. Realizations in Red, Part 1. The true karmic cost of an addiction to porn. Sometimes I feel like the villain in a spaghetti western. The townsfolk are all none too pleased to see me. They're waiting for Clint Eastwood to save them, and he never shows, because the good, the bad, and the ugly are all one and the same. Well, it's high noon, and I'm all out of card tricks, so here goes. Heads up, folks, this article is for adults only. It mentions psychology, addiction, adult themes, and societal taboos. It's not for kiddos. It's for adults who want to better understand human sexuality and what's behind the darkness in their minds. So we begin with the title. In all seriousness, I've realized a profound hidden truth, that everything that has befallen me is actually my fault. Imagine that. Imagine that even though my current state, one of total defamation, was caused by gossip and derision without any basis in fact, I now see that the situation I'm in is actually my fault. Although I'm not the predator or psychopath that I've been made out to be, I am, of course, still the cause of all my problems. I know I blamed others in the past, and everything I said was true, so let me explain. All along, I truly felt that I hadn't earned the label of a social pariah, and that it had been thrust upon me by unfair circumstances. But there's actually a line of misdeeds in my past that I can trace from the past up to now, showing that what has befallen me is karmically my fault. I am, you see, an intellectual property thief. I should explain. I have spent years stealing and watching media that I frankly don't own. In the digital world, we can get our hands on movies without buying them all the time. But if I opened, watched, and enjoyed a movie that I didn't pay for, then that makes me a thief. If it was available for sale and I didn't pay for it, that's a problem, right? Sometimes a website buys the rights to show the movie for free, and that's fine. But if the website I use has no rights and took the free or cheating option, then that means that I'm stealing. As we all know, I'm one of millions who would thieve in such a way, using sites where the media is free instead of going to the producer's site and paying the $5 or $10 it costs to watch. I realize that I've been stealing movies for decades, and I'm completely embarrassed by this fact, and the realization came to me only a few days ago. When I watched porn, I thought I was just hurting myself. I didn't account for the theft. I never steal anything in real life. I don't shoplift at the grocery store, the art store, or the restaurant. I pay for what I consume. But online, no. I pay for what I watch when it comes to movies or TV shows, and I don't pirate that kind of media. The only free site, ad-supported, that I visit now is Tubi, and that's perfectly legal. But when it comes to porn, I would think nothing of queuing up and watching something that isn't supposed to be there. The companies that make those videos or comic strips put a price on them. And porn pirates like myself and millions of others go and download the content for free on some other site which hosts thousands of videos. And I'm not watching clips. No, I'm watching the whole thing. And so it totally makes sense that my fate has gone very dark. I was outed as a porn addict years ago, which I'm not sure is so scandalous by itself. But I was also labeled a child predator owing to a rumor started about me 20 years ago that was never nipped in the bud because I wasn't aware of it, and I was terribly distracted by other personal problems. But if my karma was clean, I would have probably overturned the rumor or personal attack around the time that it happened. Because my karma was sullied by years of porn piracy, I can understand how so much bad luck befell me. Even despite pursuing recovery, the 12 steps, Islamic mysticism, and a life of service in the world. I came to this realization last week. I still have trouble avoiding pirated porn because it's everywhere, but I'm going to try really hard to avoid porn, and especially porn that I have no right to watch because I didn't pay for the media or content that is in fact offered for sale. What I'm talking about is not a clip or a 3-minute soundbite, but the whole thing. I know the difference, and I don't need to play the devil's advocate with myself. A person knows when they're watching the whole movie versus when what they're watching is a free or promotional clip. Realizations in Red Part 2 coming up next. All right, so this was the first part of my 3-part series, which all 3 parts are going to be in this podcast. But as you can see, I'm reflecting on one element of this behavior, this online behavior where you're watching stuff that you didn't pay for. And I'm reflecting on the fact that there's a karmic cost for doing so. And that karmic cost is that I'm kind of left vulnerable. I'm left unable to protect myself in other areas, or I'm attracting bad karma that's so large and looming that I don't really understand how to respond to it. So let's continue. Going to take a quick break. All right, we're now starting part 2. By the way, I have a embedded song or embedded music from the band The Darkness on each of my Realizations in Red posts. They're for paid subscribers, but you can check them out if you're willing to be a paid subscriber, which is good because then you can zero in on some aspects of what I'm saying, double check it, study it, and see if it's useful to you. Anyways, when you watch it on my Substack, so the music that I chose from The Darkness, I think is especially fitting for the topic. And in fact, the song that was playing on part 1 was One Way Ticket by The Darkness, and the song on part 2 is Love Is Only a Feeling. All right, and yeah, these guys have some experience in this same area, although it might be alcohol, but they still know what it's like. Okay, why do we search for toxic, overcharged themes in porn? And why do we talk? Okay, so why do we search for toxic, overcharged themes in porn? And why do we go back to the same ones again and again? All right, so I've come to an important realization in answer to this question. Each pornographic theme in our search history has a deeper allegorical meaning that comes from our subconscious. With time, I've uncovered answers to this question, but I needed to stop immersing myself in the media to get away from it to see things clearly. Often the reasons would just appear simply. For example, the taboo theme in porn generates a lot of clicks and views, and I have a lot of experience with that theme. If you watch that type of porn, it's because the illusion it offers has some meaning to you, and I'll explain with a few points. Number one, communication interrupted. Sometimes in real families, true, fair, and honest communication is stunted or unable to occur. So this creates psychological blocks for children and the adults that children grow up to become adults who have great difficulty communicating what they feel inside. A crucial life skill is being able to communicate with others for all types of reasons. It could be setting boundaries, compelling others to understand your intentions, or expressing care, or anything else that's important to you. If you're unable to communicate or have great difficulty doing so, it causes more pain and may even make the person unable to stop abuse directed at them. Sex isn't communication. The sex addict or the porn addict mistakes sex for communication. To them, sex is a substitute for the communication needed that seems to be impossible to accomplish. It is for them conveying one's emotions. For them, conveying one's words and emotions through language seems remote, but sex seems much easier to accomplish. Obviously, sex isn't really communication. Sex does not communicate what's on the mind or in the heart. It does create a physical bond, or it can, but without sharing what's on your mind or in your emotions, the relationship will be more or less empty. Insight. On some level, the porn addict, this is number 3, insight. On some level, the porn addict thinks they are watching communication when they're watching people have sex in videos. So they watch more and more, hoping that they will gain some insight into how they might communicate with another person. Okay. Now, you might think that porn addicts watch to derive pleasure. To some small degree, that's true, but you'd be surprised how little of porn watching is motivated by pleasure or seeking pleasure or being already aroused, and how much is motivated more by, 1, feeling in control. You stop, you play, you rewind, you go back, you go to the end, you feel that you're in control, and thinking that you are gaining insight into how communication works, thinking that you're learning something. When it comes to taboo porn, how many people have difficulty communicating with family members? It's very common that family is difficult to communicate with, at least for some people. Some get lucky and have parents that are easy to talk to, but most do not. So then the logic follows that in taboo porn with the stepmom or the stepdad, you get the idea. I'm uncomfortable going into the details, but you get the idea. The porn addict thinks that they're watching two people communicate because, in a subconscious sense, they believe that the sex is communication, and that the sex addict or the porn addict in their childhood has had the experience of an unsolved mystery. Why is it so difficult for me to communicate with my parents? There's no doubt that all these people, hundreds of millions, who have watched porn have no desire to copulate with family members, especially an older generation. Ew, gross, right? If that weren't true, then millions of people would be trying to shag their elders. And that's just not the case. Excuse me, that's just not the case. That's because when you're watching some type of taboo porn, you're having a spectator experience. You're saying to yourself, oh, that's what they do, huh? And often the watcher is thinking, well, that's just weird. I'd never do that. Let's just keep watching. And one keeps watching until they can't watch anymore for a while. So the two short-term payoffs in watching are, one, my family may be messed up, but at least we're not doing that. These people, who aren't real, by the way, they're just actors or performers, are really messed up. Thank goodness we're not like them. It's that feeling of, at least I'm not as messed up as these people. Number two is that maybe if I keep watching, I'll glean some insights into how to communicate. After all, most of the time in these videos or stories, before the two people go at it, they have to say something to each other. They have to talk. There has to be some dialogue, no matter how cheesy it is, because the characters are saying something to each other. Something. Okay. Okay, so I phrased that wrong. Because the characters are saying something to each other, the porn addict watches the taboo porn. I'll just leave it like that. There we go. So, therein we know what the addict is after. One, feeling that they're better than the messed up people who are going at it. Feeling that there's some insight or clue as to how to communicate in the video, in what they're watching, because the addict feels that sex is communication on some subconscious level. And feeling that they're witnessing communication between family members as if this is real or not a performance. And finally, feeling that they are in control because they can stop and play this experience at will. Okay. And we know from the previous writing that they are being trapped in a karmic vortex whereby they are often stealing media and will pay the price for being a thief spiritually, karmically, even though they're otherwise considered afflicted people suffering mental illness, and they're in need of support rather than hostility. So far I've covered two themes. One, the karmic cost of the addiction, and two, the driving force behind it. Okay, in my next letter, I'm going to write about the false conclusions that others draw about the porn addict, and how those false conclusions can severely damage that person's life. So that's part 3 coming right up. Okay, Realizations in Red, Part 3. What are society's false assumptions about porn addiction? And what can the addict do about it? What will others assume when the addict gets outed or exposed for watching taboo porn? Here are a series of absolutely false conclusions others will form regarding the addict who watches taboo porn. The false assumptions: that the watcher wants to copulate with their family members and is watching to gain some type of insight into how to accomplish this. This is not true and not the motivation for the millions of people watching this type of porn. That the watcher plans to have sex with a minor. This is also not true because millions, close to billions, watch this type of porn. And if it were true, then there would be hundreds of millions of pedophiles roaming the earth, including women and men. Thankfully, this is not the case. Pedophilia is not at all caused by watching porn. It's caused by abusing the person when they were a child, and it's caused by a very specific type of abuse where the child experiences shame for being attracted to whom they would be attracted to when they would become an adult. In other words, they experience abuse directed at their arousal template, whether it's oriented towards males or females. This can occur whether the child or adolescent is heterosexual or homosexual, as long as the parent's view of sexuality is inhumane or unhealthy, and the child is shamed for being attracted to the sex or gender they're attracted to. When people might assume, number 3, that the watcher is gay, is homosexual, when they're not. Because even if one watches a sex scene between an older woman and a younger man, thinking that the older woman is attractive, people won't know that. People will not know that the watcher is attracted to the older woman and not the younger man. People have no way of knowing where your attention is directed in the video and might assume that your attraction is to the younger person, not the older. Now, there's nothing wrong with being gay, of course, as I just conveyed in my previous statement. But, of course, if people assume that a straight person is attracted to young men or boys of the same sex, they will stigmatize that person, and that can be an uncomfortable situation to be in. So there's a risk of this happening. Okay, so number 4, people might assume that what you watch is something you plan to enact or realize. People rarely watch movies or porn planning to enact the scene in some way. When you watch an action movie, it doesn't mean that you want to become a real-life superhero with a cape and weapons. If you watch a horror movie or a documentary about murder, you don't plan to murder anyone. No one watches a movie for tips as to how to make it real. If you're a dancer and you watch a movie about a dancer, like the movie Flashdance, which I recently watched, the odds are that you feel some minor connection to the character, but your circumstances are totally different. You exist in a different context, a different time, with different goals. Are you a welder by day and a dancer by night? Probably not. So unfortunately, with pornography, because the motivations of the viewers are not well understood, people may make direct connections between you and the stuff you're watching, thinking that what you watch is something you want to do and become part of. You watch an orgy, then to them it means that you want to have an orgy. The chances are that you want nothing of the sort. With movies, no one assumes that you want to realize what you watch, but with porn, people assume that selection represents intent, that what you choose represents what you want to do. For the benefit of millions of people around the world who formed addictions to pornography and hope to find healing in therapy or recovery or community support, the assumptions above must be canceled, and the insights I provided must replace the false assumptions. Please share and help me in doing so. And take it from me, because I have the experience needed to speak authentically about this topic, even though it's a controversial subject. And finally, what can the addict do to get out of it? Okay, it's no easy road, but here are some things that will help. Place value and focus on authentic communication with family members, loved ones, and friends, also known as radical honesty heretofore. Communication will be no easier than before, but the individual needs to renew the sense of value they feel for communication and renew their sense of appreciation for any amount of communication, however small, between family members, because it's so much better than acting out or becoming mired in addiction. Adopt a disciplined practice or routine in pursuit of anti-addiction habits. Anything that the addiction doesn't want you to do, such as 12-step meetings or something similar where there's honest communication with other people with the same goal. Now, you can also incorporate exercise, working out, meditation, but keep the focus on something, which is there are direct attacks, right? Like developing your communication habits, writing about your experiences, going to meetings where this topic is discussed, where people have solutions. And then there are auxiliary things that are just kind of like life improvement things, like working out, like eating healthy, like taking trips instead of staying home and staying stuck in front of the computer. There are things that are kind of auxiliary that support, and there are things that are central. And knowing that an auxiliary supportive behavior is not a direct attack, but it's a leg. It's a supporting structure. So make sure you have something that's a direct undoing, and then make sure you have other things that are supporting the undoing of the addiction. But don't think, well, instead of acting out, I'm going to work out, right? Because what I've found happens is you work out, you act out. You have time for both, right? You work out, but then as soon as your workout is done, okay, you go act out. You kind of, it's an invisible trigger. It's not known why you're doing it. You don't know why you're doing it. You've done good things for yourself. You had a good day. You had a good meeting with a friend. You had all these good things happen. You can still act out even when you're feeling good. Addicts act out when they're feeling good. They act out when they're not feeling good. They do it. They stick it in everywhere. Okay, so you want to have things that are kind of like a reversal of addiction, where you're actually communicating, where you're actually addressing the issue, where you're actually talking about your needs, where you're actually listening to others, where you're actually developing relationships and real friendships. And then all that, I'm going to start working out, I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to start taking a class, a painting class, whatever. It's supportive behavior. Okay, engage in writing. This one really works for me. Engage in writing that delves into topics that delves into what troubles the individual. All right, I'm going to start that one over. Engage in topics that delve into what troubles the individual in the hopes of unlocking hidden truths, like the realizations I've had about what I was really seeking when I turned to porn, or the true cost of consuming this media that has been, or how I can pursue what I was really getting after without illusions, misdirections, drugs of any sort, or targets that are false and will cause further damage. All right, I feel like I should write a conclusion. Okay, but that's really the end of my realizations in red, my 3 pieces, my 3 pages on what I was really after, or why people do this, what it has cost me, and also how I or you or all of us or society, the bigger picture, let's zoom out, how we can turn this all around. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it can be really helpful for people. So if you can't support my channel by subscribing and setting up a paid subscription, listen to this podcast, because what's in here is really good stuff. And get in touch. Like, subscribe, share. And then there's rating. You can rate stuff, and you can send me a message. And I'd like to hear from you if I can do that. I know this podcast is still really small, and it's just me here talking, but I don't have a problem with that. Have a good day, and find what works for you, and let me hear about it. Thank you.